Hello, everybody, and good morning. My name's Don Arleth, and you're watching World Talks, coming to you live from Warsaw. The UK, Canada, and Australia formally recognized Palestine as a state on Sunday. 147 member states of the UN now recognize the state of Palestine, and more are expected to join the list on Monday at a special UN conference dedicated to the issue in New York. Israel condemns these moves and says that they reward Hamas, allowing terrorism to achieve political goals. And now joining me to discuss what this will and won't achieve is President of MENA Research Center, Dennis Kolesnyk. Good morning, Dennis, and thank you so much for joining us on World Talks. Yesterday we've seen the UK, Canada, and Australia formally recognize a Palestinian state, with France expected to follow. How significant is this diplomatic shift, and what message does it send to Israel and the wider Middle East?
First of all, we have to remember that the United Kingdom, I guess 2 months ago, has said that it would recognize the Palestinian state if Israel continues its operation, its policies regarding in Gaza. So we observe what has already been promised, more or less. What are the implications? First of all, it is important to say that with the UN General Assembly resolution with overwhelming support for the recognition of the Palestinian state, it is something that legitimizes this process. Moreover, Franco-Saudi Arabian cooperation on this also highlights we have a heavyweighter as France and the UN Security Council member that support this initiative. Also, we have one of the Middle Eastern leaders, Saudi Arabia, that is positions itself as important negotiator and a mediator for this issue and supporter. Which elevates also its role not only in the Middle East, but on the global arena. And Mohammed bin Salman was quite successful with this regard. So we observe something that is happening. There is a moment. At the same time, how far would it go, and how would it impact Israeli's actions? It remains a question.
It does. Concerning Prime Minister Netanyahu, he called these recognitions a reward to terrorism, while Western leaders stress that it's not about Hamas, but about reviving the two-state solution. How do you see this as a clash of narratives playing out at the UN?
Since the Hamas attack on Israel on October 7th, 2023, the two-state solution is no longer an option for Benjamin Netanyahu and Israel, at least what comes from the official position of Israel. As for the movement towards the recognition of Palestinian state, the Western leaders are not guided by the idea of legitimizing Hamas. On the contrary, I'm not quoting word by word the French President Emmanuel Macron, but when he was talking to the American channel, he said that when we give the people of Palestine the state and they want the state, on the contrary, it delegitimizes Hamas, because there is no longer need to this kind of armed fight against, for this cause. And the idea is to let's say, politically empower the Palestinian people to have their nation.
But essentially, these moves and the accumulation of the recognition by so many states is essentially forcing the two-state solution on Israel, but then Israel has to respect that decision. What happens next?
That's quite a question, indeed. And for instance, right now, you remember there were Abraham Accords and the normalization process in the Middle East before the Hamas attacked Israel in 2023. And today, for instance, this process with regard to Saudi Arabia is tied to the process of the recognition of the Palestinian state. So somehow, as you have rightly said, that there is the imposition of this process on Israel and its backer, the United States of America, because we've seen during the vote at the UN General Assembly, there were only 10 nations who have voted against Israel, and the United States among them. And I guess in Europe it was only Hungary who also voted against, which means is that even for the United States it would be much more difficult, because we know that Saudi Arabia is one of a few United States allies in the region, and it would be more complicated for Donald Trump and the United States to pursue the agenda of full support to Israel on the one hand, and for the Israelis, there are different positions, and I hear different positions as well coming from Israel, saying that it will not change anything, that Israel will continue its operation and to pursue its political goals. But yet again, it would be quite complicated if Israel will become more and more isolated on the international arena to pursue with its policies. And maybe at some point in the midterm future, there will be a ground for searching for a consensus. Let's put it this way.
A U.S. State Department spokesperson dismissed this as performative. He said, "Our focus remains on serious diplomacy, not performative gestures. Our priorities are clear: the release of hostages, the security of Israel, and peace and prosperity for the entire region. That is only possible free from Hamas." Now, when we talk about the families of Israeli hostages in Gaza, how will this affect them, and how will this affect the release of these hostages?
Indeed, the hostages release, it is one of the, let's say, first steps that should take place. And politically speaking, as of today, I have difficulty to understand how this process will be going on. But for obvious reasons, if the Hamas manages to go with releasing the hostages, it would be a very good step from them, and actually for the Palestinians as a whole, as a nation, to show their readiness to follow the process of the recognition of the Palestinian state. And obviously, it would be quite a positive move with regard to the families of the Israeli families who have suffered, or who have their relatives captured by the Hamas terrorists.
Right, but if this whole plan revolves around the fact that Hamas cannot be the government chosen there in a free Palestinian state, then what incentive would Hamas have to release these hostages at this point?
If Hamas wanted the Palestinian state, so it should go with it, and then there should be negotiations, and then we, as a collective West, we should impose on them and on the, I wouldn't say on the Palestinians, but we should favor the process of elections, and the fact that Hamas should be isolated from this process. But if they will be able to say that their let's say their idea of having Palestinian state is achieved, so where is the problem if they will not be a part of this? But yet again, I understand it is in the ideal world, and as I have said at the beginning, I have difficulties to see how this will play out.
Yes. Now, the summit is being held as Israel's military campaign, obviously, in Gaza continues and famine looms in the north. Do you believe that the recognition alone can change the situation on the ground, or does it need to be backed by more concrete measures and guarantees?
It is again quite difficult to say, and I have already said that the process of the political process on the international stage we are observing right now, and its consequence on Israel, I still don't have the clear vision of how Israel will move and how big the impact of this will be on Israel's decision and resolve to continue with its policies. At the same time, some of the Israeli actions, they have angered the Western world, and they have let's say, decreased credibility of Israel in the eyes of many in the West. Therefore, there also should be understanding I guess, in Israel that there are limits. There are limits to some military actions, and there are limits to the way to pursue the military action. I understand that it could be quite difficult to hear this message in Israel, for example, but at the same time, as I have said, and I'm repeating many politicians and Western politicians, that some of the Israeli actions on the ground have actually were quite counterproductive for the Western support for Israel that was quite resolved since October 7, 2023.
Okay, well, we'll have to see which way this heads later on today in New York. Denis Kolesnyk, president of the MENA Research Center, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
And that concludes this edition of World Talks. Thanks for joining us, and stay with us for more here on TVP World.